Hello and what is up, all my RC people? Oh, I don't know if y'all remember, but a little bit ago we opened that giant box of vintage RC, Losi and Traxxas and a couple Tamayas that I picked up, and I think it's time to get one of these up and running before I start the Scorpion build. So the easiest one to get running is going to be this Losi XXCR buggy. I don't think it'll take too much to get it up and going. It's mostly there. It's in pretty decent shape, but it is dirty. He's got a lot of surface rust. It's been sitting for many years. Well, I think the first thing to do is to tear this transmission out of the back. Make sure it's all greased up. But you can see it rolls nice and smooth, so that's a daggone good sign. And it does have, I believe this is the one that has the graphite chassis. Yeah, it's got the graphite chassis. So I'm just going to start tearing this thing apart and getting her cleaned up, and I'll get back with you. So we're back, and I've gotten quite a bit of it torn apart. And as I started working on this thing, went to grab my standard Tamiya tool set that I normally use on all my RCs, and as soon as the first wrench spun, I was like, oh, wait a second. I remember. These are American-made RCs from the late 80s and early 90s. And back in that time, we used this thing called Standard American. So, luckily for me, I still had all my old tools from when I was racing RC10 in the 90s. So I had all my dynamite hex heads, and I had all the old, I'm sure some of you remember these yellow-handled hex heads. But luckily with these dynamites, I mean, look at this. This is your wheel nut, and it was, I think, wheel nut was a 3/8 on this thing. So that took a little bit of time to find all my tools to where I could start tearing it apart. But I did tear it apart. Yeah, the normal. It's dirty back in there. That's to be expected. This thing's old and it's seen some use, but the tires seem to be in really good shape. Look at those all cleaned up and thrown in. All the parts seem to be in good working order that I've found so far. A little bit of scrape on the motor basket, but that's not a big deal at all. And then the transmission itself. Now the transmission runs smooth, but I'm glad I opened it up. We've seen this before. That is bone dry, folks. There is not a single drop of oil in that entire thing. Well, differential still feels smooth. But I got to get this all oiled back up, and then I'll start getting stuff lined up and bolted back together. I've got most of the transmission cleaned up. I just used a dry toothbrush for the nylon gears, and the metal gears I used a brass bristled brush. And then I decided I should probably go ahead and open up our ball diff, and I'm glad I did, because it's quite dirty in there. I better be careful before I lose those. But I'm going to get that cleaned up, greased up, and thrown back in. So all back together, and here's where we're at so far. You can see this thing just rolls smooth as can be. Those are that ball diff in there, and then it's also got the ball diff on the slipper clutch too, which is pretty cool, which I also took apart and re-greased everything on that. The more I work on this thing, the more I realize just how much it's been tinkered with. If you look, this block and this block are not the same. And same with the turnbuckles. If you look, it's got a different style turnbuckle. I had to make quite a bit of different adjustments to make it so the wheels set nice and level. But it's all cleaned up fairly decent. At least the back half. I got a little bit more cleaning to do back in here. But the next step is I've got this ESC, which I've never used this brand before, so pop it open and have a quick look at that. It's a 60 amp ESC, and this is you get a little instructions. But what I thought was kind of neat is it is rated for 2 to 3S LiPo, and it does have a crawl brake if you wanted to use it in your crawler, so that's kind of a nice little option. I'm going to get the connector switched out though, because that definitely, the Tamiya connector is not going to work for me. I'm going to throw an XT60 on there. And with the motor, I'm going to run this Reedy Conquest CE. I know the standard Reedy Conquest is a 27 turn. I do not know about the CE model, if it's any different or not. So if somebody's had any experience with these, I'd be glad to hear about it. I'm going to get this stuff done and thrown in, and we'll go from there. Everything's hooked up and working, but something was interesting. I know you can't really see it from the camera view very well, but the on and off positions are reversed. So if you buy one of these ESCs, make sure you check the on and off. I have it set up on a Fly Sky under Buggy 3X. We'll click that on. I just have a 2S LiPo sitting under it. I got some ordered to fit it along with all my Tamiyas. The steering's working good. I have to do a little trim adjustments on it, but running nice and smooth. I'm not sure how many tooth that spur gear is. I couldn't find an indicator on it, but I do have a 19 tooth pinion on it. And I think from about where that motor's running, it probably is a 27 turn, but so once again, if any of you know about that Conquest CE, let me know. All right, we're just about ready to take this thing out and give it a test. Okay, so the XXCR is ready to take out and try. The wing I came up with, that is a Traxxas Bandit wing that I've cut down. It was like $3 at the hobby store. And then I found some wing wire, and those are Team Associated wing clips to hold it on. So it's a little bit off from the original, but it still looks better than it did without the tail spoiler. Now the spoiler turned out really bright, so bright you can't hardly read the lettering on the Team Losi I put on there. We'll probably see that better when I get it outside for our first run. Well, there, I can kind of see it through the back. But yeah, there we go. We are ready to take it out and run it, so let's get this thing out there. So there it is, the Losi XXCR finally out and running after probably close to 30 years, something like that. I think these are 80s, 90s. But yeah, so she's up and running and working. So next thing to do is to get this thing out and start racing it with some of the other stuff we've got up and running. Well, let's put the Losi XXCR in the race series. I'll see y'all there. Have a good one.
Yeah.